We're going to record this and put it up on our YouTube later. We have a great presentation for everybody here. We are Wallingford for all. I do not live in Wallingford, but there's a group of about 45 of us that formed a few months ago in Wallingford. I would say that has about 75% of the folks are Wallingford residents. Not everybody is. And I'm the convener of it, but I get bossed around by them. They tell me what they want me to do. So I'm going to welcome us. We're going to have a land acknowledgement with calls to action. I'm going to present my slides. Josh will present his slides. Sandy's going to present her slides. Then we're going to have a Q&A. And you can learn about Wallingford for All's work and see this video later on at our website. There's a frequently asked questions document why we're doing this work, and there's a volunteer form. And yeah, hope you check it out. We are on stolen land of the first people of Seattle that were told when the city of Seattle was formed, you have to leave, and barred from the city. Coast Salish people, in particular the Duwamish people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe, who, as many of you know, are fighting for recognition. They just announced recently they're doing a lawsuit, so that's exciting. And one of the ways that you can honor the first peoples that are still among us on this land is the Daybreak Star Cultural Center, which I live near and is absolutely amazing. They have really great markets, and they have a little tiny gift shop that's amazing, and a really cute, beautiful little art gallery, which is actually really special. And then the Longhouse is down, in the Duwamish Valley, and the Longhouse is amazing. They have beautiful native plants. They have walking tours where they talk about the native plants. They've worked with the port to restore some parkland. And they have a boat that you can take as well. You can take boat tours with them, and all of those things you pay a fee for, and it's a way to support the Duwamish. You can also pay rent to them through real rent. And then if you don't live in Seattle and you're watching this, you can check out what land you're on at whos.land/en. And I'm going to include these slides in the YouTube video. And so there's a little thing about why we do land acknowledgements, where that came from. Okay, Wallingford for All, like I said, there's about 45 of us. We include renters and homeowners in and near the proposed historic district. We also have folks that live in Roosevelt, Queen Anne, and a lot of us have daydreams of living in Wallingford. And then I'm Laura. I do about 5 hours of staff support a week for Share the City's Community Education. What have we done? We've done tabling across from QFC 2 Saturdays in March and 2 in May, Canvas door-to-door 8 weeknights in March, and several in May, with one tomorrow night, probably our last one for the month. And then a taxation presentation with the King County Assessors team, which you can watch on YouTube and on the website. And we'll do that again. We've also spoken to Lincoln High School students. They reached out to us, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to do 2 more classes, I think, next week. And then there's a community conversations convening with this guy, Ari, who's doing his PhD and focusing on Wallingford community. That's happening tomorrow. We're waiting to see the scope of work from the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to see what they determine in terms of the actual boundaries that are going to be sent to the National Park Service for the historic district. And then we're going to continue doorbelling once we know the revised geographic boundaries of the district. This is the current area. We've mostly focused on this area. We haven't done this half yet, just because of time and energy. And then there's a couple of other areas, and we encourage everyone to learn about Historic Wallingford's work. They do treasure hunts that are super cool, and they're really interested in educating people about the history of the community, which we are a fan of. We're a fan of history and preservation of that history and learning about it. And it does strengthen our communities. What we are asking for is a pause to the historic districts until after the comprehensive plan process. And we're educating people as we knock on the doors. We're finding out why they either support or don't support or have questions about the historic district. And what we kept hearing over and over and over and over and over again, like whether people supported it or not, was about 50-50 of the doors we knocked on in terms of people's support. But what we heard is people are really worried about trees. They're really scared about losing trees. And they're that fear is driving a lot of like decisions in the neighborhood. And so one of the things Share the City's community education wants to do is connect people with the people that are actually doing the work on that issue that they're worried about. So we've got Sandy, amazing tree advocate that does a lot of different things, including Last 6,000, which is an Instagram and a community group that does farmers markets outreach and gives out trees and tree education and tracks all the trees in Seattle that are really large and like the kind of tree that you love in your neighborhood. And then Joshua Morris is with Seattle Audubon Society, also the Urban Forestry Commission, and has educated me patiently. Both of them have about trees. Sandy for a while now, and Joshua more recently. And I encourage everyone to check out our Earth Day op-ed that we did in The Stranger, trying to say how we can have both and solutions, and just hosted an event recently that you can watch about that exact topic. I think it was very well attended, which is awesome. So you should look for that tree and video. Check out Urban Forestry Commission's monthly meetings with public comment opportunity, the first and third Wednesday. Table at farmers markets with Last 6,000, or you can just like show up and talk to them. You can check the Instagram for that. And then the Visions of Wallingford is that thing I spoke about earlier that Ari's doing. That's this week from 7 to 8 p.m. On Thursday, and it's an hour-long kind of beginning conversation. He's going to be filming folks, so if you live in Wallingford, work in Wallingford, have some deep connection to it, he wants to film you to kind of gather all the stories together, and then he's going to premiere the film in the fall. So Josh and Sandy, either of you can go first. We can do like paper, rock, scissors in a minute. But I'm just going to read your bios real quick. So Joshua Morris, him is Seattle's Audubon's urban conservation manager and co-chair of Seattle's Urban Forestry Commission. He works to improve access to green space, to reduce urban hazards to wildlife. Another big thing that I've been educated about, how to reduce bird deaths, which is really important, and to engage communities in conservation initiatives right where they live, right here. And then Sandy is an active tree advocate, gardener, and native plant and urban forest steward. Sandy served on the Seattle Parks Association Recreation Council, was a volunteer coordinator with Seattle Public Schools, and as a medical social worker, she appreciates the interdependency of people and a healthy urban forest, which I think is really beautiful. Me, some things that you might not know about me that I don't always talk about is I have a degree in plant biology. I worked at the National Park Service to restore the Zuma freshwater lagoon. I got to see dolphins every day. It was pretty amazing. I was a horticulture worker at Garfield Park Conservatory. I taught middle school science. I was a volunteer with Washington State Sierra Club as well as the local chapter. I do love bird watching quite a bit. Have my little harness that I can wear when I'm with my binoculars, super nerdy, from the Audubon shop. And I do love Seattle's trees. And then I founded Share the City's community education, which is what we're doing tonight. So yeah, so I can go first. I've talked a lot. Before we get into my presentation, maybe we can hear just a little bit more about why you guys were excited to be here tonight, and then I can rattle on some more. If you guys want to just say hi real quick to everybody here.
Of course, thank you, Laura. And I'm really happy to be here. I've enjoyed working and learning alongside Laura. I've learned a lot about housing supply issues, and her political savviness is something that I'm keeping a close eye on, so appreciate that. As Laura said, I'm Josh. I'm with Seattle Audubon Society. I'm also currently serving as the co-chair of Seattle's Urban Forestry Commission. Disclaimer, I'm not here as part of that group, so not speaking on behalf of the commission, but I'm always excited to meet new people, talk about trees, and expand participation in conversations about improving tree protections and management in Seattle, because honestly, the city's tired of hearing from me. So I'd love for them to hear from more people who aren't me, and that's why I'm glad to be here tonight.
Oh man, I've said that before. Sandy.
Yeah, and I have to second Josh, because just through the recent years that I've been advocating for trees, I have to say it's a fairly small group. Everyone loves trees, but not that many people before were as aware of just how much they needed to be protected. So I've been very grateful because you are such an amazing activist, Laura, just that you have supported so many of the things that we've been trying to do with protect trees. And I'm not speaking for the last 6,000, and I actually don't really know anything about historic districts, but if someone asks me to talk about trees, I never say no. And so I'm excited to be. Thank you.
That was a good disclaimer. Yeah, we're all, you know, we don't have to agree on everything, but the things that we do agree on, let's see how we can make those changes. And I think that spirit is really important now more than ever. So yeah, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Can everyone see that? Okay. Everyone buckle in for the exciting part, trees and climate. So one of my favorite places to go, this isn't a particularly, I don't remember where this is. My buddy Greg sent that one to me, but Occidental is a place where you can find this kind of walkway with trees and, you know, really beautiful examples around the world that people gravitate to, especially I really want to emphasize, like when we go on vacation, you know, all of us, when we go on vacation, you know, we seek out these spaces, you know, in fall, when the colors are changing, in winter, you know, even trees in the winter are gorgeous. So just, you know, when it gets political, we all kind of get into our corners about trees, but think about the places that you love in the world and how trees are part of what you love about them. Trees and cities and climate are interconnected. I think most people that are showing up tonight or watching this know this. So, you know, this is review, but one way cities can help trees is by providing human habitation on less land. We have to conserve underdeveloped land while meeting human needs. Cities protect agriculture and forest. To do this, we must build up rather than out. So that's, you know, a value statement. Not everybody shares that value, but, you know, it is something that our city and our state and our government protect with something called the Growth Management Act. So we have an urban growth boundary, which was created to meet this value. So living in Washington State, we do have this like very legal document that says we are going to protect agricultural and forest and concentrate growth and in our cities and new neighbors in our cities. And that creates a lot of tension and a lot of difficult decisions in our urban tree canopy. I always find this image, you know, really inspiring, where you have folks waiting for, you know, a tram, electric trolley system, and, you know, everything's green. And, you know, I think the idea that urbanists and tree advocates are at odds is, you know, really played up by journalists and by media and on Twitter fights and at city council meetings. But again, you know, thinking about where we all like to go on our day off or where we like to go on vacation, you know, there's a lot of overlap in all of the sides of this debate. Trees collect and store carbon in the city, not a ton, but some. And they protect habitat for insects, birds, and animals. And it brings nature, you know, outside of, you know, our windows immediately to us. And we all have seen the importance of that during the pandemic more now than ever. Air conditioning. This is really important with global warming. Shade from leaves cools the surface through transpiration, the evaporation of water from inside the leaves of a tree's canopy, which cools the air. This natural air conditioning protects people and reduces the heat island effect of cities, especially during heat waves. And there's a real disparate impact. And I didn't put this in here, but I'm going to add it afterwards, around the disparate impact to different communities based on you know, the temperature that it gets on a hot day and the danger to the community and the relief that people can seek out. It's really inequitable across the country in terms of who benefits and who suffers. There's a sponge city approach where cities, trees, city streets, parks, and yards are used to collect and infiltrate water, keeping out of the storm water system. This water supports trees and also allows them to transpire during dry times. So a lot of times we hear these talking points And some of my peers have, dismissed this stuff, but this is facts. This is true. This is something that we need to consider when we're making our urban planning decisions. Here's a picture, a nerdy picture, if you want to get real nerdy about transpiration and cooling and all of that cool stuff. I get nerdy about this stuff. Trees and climate, we have to preserve space. Let's build up. We need space for forested parks in our cities, tree-lined streets and squares. We need long-lived native and climate change resilient trees and high quality soils. My buddy sent me this thing. He's like, check this out. He's a climate scientist. He's like, let's get really nerdy and talk about suspended pavement. I'm not going to get into this, but I just want to mention it. If people are like really, really, really into trees, learn about suspended pavement, learn about soil under pavement, learn about street trees, learn about parking lots, and learn about all the things that go into Seattle Department of Transportation or some other city department putting trees in the ground. It's really complicated. And the more we know, the better policy we can make. So don't be afraid to dig into these nerdy resources. Okay, that's me.
I was muted there. And you're going to do my slides, Laura?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah. So I just want to share with you today how trees and forests benefit the community, the challenges they face, and how you can help trees by getting involved with them, both personally and advocating for all of Seattle's trees. So next slide. And this is anecdotally how I got involved in trees. I just took these pictures yesterday, actually. They're both around the block from me. So they're the same thing. They're new trees planted by developers when some properties were developed. And the ones on the left were planted in 2016, and no one ever watered them and they died. And then the ones on the right, I had seen that happen. And so when the developer put these trees in, I went and knocked on the neighbors' doors and introduced myself and gave them watering bags. And they just took off, and they've watered them every summer, and they're growing. They're already providing some shade. So it's just a point of inspiration, and also a story of how I started to really care about trees. So next slide. And I wanted to draw your attention. We talked about the infrastructure benefits of trees, but people living close to trees, there are so many health benefits from this, both mental and physical health, social and community health. People who live close to trees have better health metrics, whether you're talking about rates of cancer, lower blood sugar and low blood pressure, faster healing from trauma and accidents and surgery. All of these things have been studied, and they're, by the way, I got all of these points from Kathy Wolf at the UW. Her site is at the bottom there, and they're all peer-reviewed large studies. So better physical health, they provide a calm environment and de-stressing, which is measured by cortisol. They've done really wonky studies with the cortisol in your saliva when you're near trees and not, and there's less when you're near trees. They encourage physical fitness and activity. They promote social interaction and build community because people are outside more. They actually make streets safer for drivers and reduce accidents. And one thing, I didn't put it on this slide, but they are also shown to reduce crime. And it used to be that people would cut trees down and keep areas really clear, thinking, well, a criminal can hide in a tree. But the studies actually show the opposite, that when trees are in an environment, more people are in the environment, there's a sense of a cared for place, and crime is greatly reduced. So that's all on Kathy's website, and I would encourage you to look at that. So next slide, thanks. So this is sort of a new metric, but it's pretty widely adopted now in the public health community. It's called the 330-300 rule. It was originally developed by a professor at University of British Columbia, and it's pretty simple. It says that once you reach this metric, which is being able to view 3 trees from your home, your neighborhood has at least 30% tree canopy, and you can walk to a green space in 300 yards. Once you've reached that level, you've reached the optimal, you've maximized your health benefits from being near trees. So if we could provide this in every neighborhood, we would see enormous benefits in public health and people's personal health. So next slide. So big question here. I ask myself this every day. I call this death by 1,000 cuts. So why doesn't Seattle have more trees? There are lots of reasons. Trees have often been cut in Seattle for views, solar access, and that often means having light for your garden or your flowers or vegetables, or it was planted in the wrong place. But I had solar panels installed on my roof a couple of years ago, and the company said, well, let's just take the top off of your evergreen because, so we can get maximum solar. I'm like, no, thanks. Anyway, and then kind of newer stress on our trees, drought stress, and which is getting worse with climate change, new pests that are moving into the Pacific Northwest with the changing climate, ivy. You may have seen in your neighborhoods, ivy just weighing down a tree and competing with it for resources, and it can take it down. And I did put scraped lot development because that's when a property is completely scraped of all greenery, you obviously are starting from scratch. So anyway, next slide. Okay, this is my last slide. I just want to leave with you that there are so many ways to get involved with trees, but I just would advocate that you get involved in a personal way by looking at the trees around you that your neighbors have, that are in your yard, get to know them and see if they need anything. They're your friends. And then also advocate for our urban forest with our city, because we need a tree protection ordinance, and Josh is going to talk a lot more about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy. That was awesome. And yeah, everyone, educate yourself about the green bag program or the green bags and how they work. And, if you see trees, don't be shy. If you see trees suffering, and, if you're too shy, reach out to Sandy, and Sandy will go knock on a door and be like, here's a green bag and here's how you use it. And one of the things, Sandy and I had reached out to, the city to say, how can we make that education more widely known? How can we make people understand how important the first few years of a tree's life are? Because that's critical for us growing our tree canopy. Is that, I think Josh will talk about this, but one of the things I learned from Josh is even if we, plant, the current trees that we have right now, are worth a lot more right now than, all the years it's going to take for those other trees. So yeah, there's a lot of forces are at play. We have a lot of different factors to consider, but whenever possible, we absolutely need to do more. Okay, it's your turn, Josh. I'm gonna add your spotlight.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you, Sandy. That was great. Before I get started, I just wanted to say a little bit about Seattle Audubon. If you're not familiar with it, we are a 106-year-old bird conservation and education organization. We are headquartered up in the Wedgwood neighborhood, but we serve an area from Shoreline to Des Moines. And the urban conservation program that I manage, as Laura said, focuses on improving access to green space, reducing urban hazards to birds, and getting people involved in conservation right where they live. And that last point is really important to the success of the work that we do. And whether or not a person gets involved in conservation depends a lot on their personal connections and emotional affinity for nature. But in cities, we know that that's easy to lose a hold of. Birds, I have found, offer us a daily point of contact with wildlife unlike any other group of animal. Even in the most intensely developed parts of town, it doesn't matter where you are, you're going to be able to find a bird. And birds extend that line of connection to nature, and they're one of the best handles that I found for drawing people into conservation. And once you start talking about bird conservation, it's really not that long until you start talking about trees. So I'd like to zoom up to about 10,000 feet and back about 200 years. So next slide, please. And this is a rendering of Seattle just a couple of centuries ago. The area was part of a vast ancient forest that was dominated by a few tree species like Douglas firs, western hemlocks, and western red cedars. There were over a dozen Coast Salish village sites in this area, and the people would have hunted and gathered from forests and waters that were teeming with life in ways that I don't believe we can really imagine today. The forests were peppered with wetlands, bogs, prairies, and laced with springs, creeks, and rivers. And I've heard someone ask once, where is the largest clear cut in Washington? Next slide, please. And they answered Seattle. So this is Seattle today. Basically, the entire city has been logged at some point, except in a few small patches like at Seward Park or at Schmitz Preserve in West Seattle. And Laura, if you're able to toggle between the image a couple of times, you can see how the Duwamish River gets straightened. There's, in fact, just one original bend left in the city. It's just across from the Duwamish Longhouse in West Seattle on West Marginal Way. And the park is called Ha'apus. And in addition to straightening the rivers and pouring a lot of concrete, another big change has been the composition of our urban forest. Instead of that ancient forest dominated by a few tree species, today our urban forest is amazingly diverse. So next slide, please. It's diverse, at least in terms of tree species. You can find Laura's favorite tree, the monkey puzzle.
I'm never going to live that down. I just said that to cause trouble.
Deodar cedars from the Himalayas, eucalyptus from Australia. There's literally trees from every tree-bearing continent. There's a local tree expert, Arthur Lee Jacobson. He's tallied more than 1,000 different types of tree in Seattle. And that's more, he reckons, than in any other city. Next slide, please. And all of these the diversity of trees is supporting a diversity of birds. We know that at least 100 different types of birds are supported by Seattle's trees, which they use them for foraging, hunting, roosting, and nesting. The trees bring birds, the birds bring us a chance to connect with wildlife. And now the question is, where are the trees in Seattle? So next slide, please. And we've done some canopy cover assessments. The most recent one was in 2016. And when you look at the land use types on which most of our forest falls, 63% on single family residential, 9% on multifamily residential. Sum those together, 72% of our urban forest is on private property, 20% is on parks or parkland, 8% is on everything else. So we know that most of our trees are on single family residential. And in fact, that's where they're most threatened as well. In the same canopy assessment, the rate of tree loss on single family residentially zoned land was faster than tree loss on any other land use type. The loss over, I believe, a 9-year period they found was approximately 800 acres, nearly twice the size of Discovery Park, just on single family residential property. And trees on single family residential and private property are governed by Seattle's Tree Protection Ordinance, which is administered by Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections. And the city released a report in 2017 that call it the Tree Regulations Research Project. And they found that Seattle's current code is not supporting tree protection. And so we've known that for a while, and we've been advocating for strengthening tree protections and management structures in Seattle. And just this year, the city proposed a draft update to Seattle's Tree Protection Ordinance. It is currently under appeal by the Master Builders Association of King and Snohomish counties. And after that's resolved, I'm sure there will be more opportunities for all of us to weigh in with our own thoughts and recommendations for how we can make that better and tighten up some of the regulations so that we can prevent untimely loss. Sandy mentioned some of the drivers, people wanting views. Another one is replacing a small house with a slightly larger house and losing trees in the middle in a way that doesn't contribute to density. Next slide, please. I just wanted to also mention that construction and development doesn't always have to be where we lose trees. It can sometimes be an opportunity to add trees. So here's an image of South Lake Union in 2014. There's a lot of parking lots, warehouses at the time. This is Mercer Street is near in the center. The Mohai is just off to the north. And if you go to the image on the next slide, which is more recent, you can see that Mercer has been widened. There's more trees along the boulevard. A lot of trees have been added around some of the high rises that have been put in. So construction can bring in heavy equipment and actually depave in ways that individuals aren't able to. That could open up new plantable space, and we can put trees in the ground. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity to use construction in currently low canopy areas as a tool to help put more trees in the ground. And I'll stop there, and maybe we can go into Q&A.
Good ending. I saw a question from Naisheen. Do you want me to read it for you, or do you want to unmute yourself? I don't know if I've given you the power to unmute yourself. I can unmute you if you want to ask your question.
You were talking about the single family tree loss. I was just wondering if we know it's mostly from development, building bigger on those lots, or is it just residents cutting down trees?
Yeah, we don't know the exact cause of all of it, but it's going to be a combination of all of those things. It's going to be people removing trees for solar access, for their own, they want to build a deck now. It's going to be from construction of McMansions, other development projects. We also know that there's very high tree removal allowances on private property when no construction is occurring. So currently, private property owners are allowed to remove up to 3 trees that are up to 30 inches. So this is
everyone say boo.
Think of a tree as wide as a refrigerator about, and you can cut that down with no permit, up to 3 of those per year. There are technically some replacement requirements if it's greater than 24 inches, but really nobody's tracking, and enforcement is really limited. So those really high tree removal allowances are certainly something that we could think about tightening up, because it's outside of development. It's just, I can't imagine why you need to cut down 3 of those per year. You could clear a lot really quickly.
Does anyone else have any questions? I see it, Brian Holly, I'm gonna unmute you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, we have a tree across the street from us. It's a historic chestnut. It's beautiful. It's stunning. Frankly, I call it the Whomping Willow because it looks like the Harry Potter Whomping Willow. If that tree were to go, and it's not because our neighbors are protecting it, is that loss treated the same as like a small tree that was recently planted that isn't working out for whatever reason? Like, I'm just wondering about the kind of the variability of different types of trees.
So when you say treated the same, are you kind of asking about replacement requirements? If that's the case, the answer is probably yes, and that there might not be any replacement requirements. There are, as I mentioned, the current code requires replacement if trees greater than 24 inches are removed. But that's only in association with development. So if a storm were to come by and knock it over, there's no replacement requirement. If it's to age out and become hazardous and needs to be removed to prevent some liabilities, there's no replacement requirement. And that's very true for all size trees at the moment.
Is that, sorry, I had to jump in. Is that true in other cities or just a Seattle problem?
No, that's not true in other cities. In other cities, there are stronger replacement requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's,
oh, sorry.
I was just going to mention that in SDCI, the Department of Construction Inspection's tree protection proposal update, there are some stronger replacement requirements, but they're one-to-one. The exact language is something to the extent of the replacement tree would be required to be roughly proportional to the canopy that was lost. So, but that doesn't give a timeline for when that canopy volume has to be replaced. Canopy, it actually is the canopy area. So that's a 2-dimensional measurement when we know that habitat and tree canopy is 3-dimensional. And so you can actually get the same canopy area with a smaller stature tree, depending on the spread of the canopy. So I think there's some problems with it, and a 1-for-1 replacement is not robust enough to really replace the tree lost the benefits that it's provided the community in any kind of reasonable amount of time. So we'd like to see stronger replacement requirements.
Yeah, and
Brian.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Brian
Oh,
and then Sandy, sorry.
Okay, yeah, go.
So yeah, it's just a question. You mentioned liability. So this is a thing I wrestle with. So like, you know, the Laura mentioned, is there a conflict between urbanism and trees? And you know, we're huge fans of Barcelona, and every time we go there, we notice like every possible spot for a street tree, there is one. They're all filled. And like on our own street, there are median strips without trees. And my understanding is that, you know, you can actually, even if you're not the homeowner behind the median strip, you can plant trees there. But my understanding is that in Seattle, the homeowner is liable for tree damage to like a sidewalk. And I really wrestle with, if that's true, I really wrestle with, am I gonna like set my neighbor up to get socked with like a giant bill down the road? Like, so I really welcome being educated on this and maybe understanding how we could change that around, because, you know, I'd plant trees on every goddamn median strip on our block next week.
So you're saying
we need a bail fund. We need a bail fund for Brian. A tree bail fund. Okay, Sandy and then Josh.
Well, I don't. So Brian, are you talking about you would be planting trees in other people's planting strips? Is that what you were? Oh, you have such an awesome spirit. I don't think you can do that. In fact, I know you can't.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure his wife wants him to do that.
Exactly. But I don't know, if you want to take this ball and run with it, this is kind of the thing I do, is I talk to everyone in my neighborhood about trees. There is a program called Trees for Neighborhoods, where you can go into a lottery and get a free tree. It's just that they have so few trees that I almost hesitate to give it out, because you'll just get disappointed, and trees don't cost that much. So in the end, I just advise people, go on the Department of Transportation tree list. They'll give you a list of trees that are good under power lines, shorter statured, or if you have big, and then they'll also do it by the width of the planting strip, and they'll give you all the species that you can plant. And they're like, I shop for trees all the time. I'm a tree addict, and they're really not that expensive. You can start with a fairly small tree. But I did want to say one thing about the maintenance. If you look, you can also go on the SDOT website and look up every street tree in the city. You can, you know, get in and get granular, and it will even tell you the species and if it's privately maintained or if the city's maintaining it. There are even some other city departments that will maintain trees. And so, not to talk too much, but this goes into what Josh and I have been working on with other tree advocates, which is there are 9 different city departments that all have to do with urban forestry. There are there's hardly any actual urban foresters that know.
Everybody say boo.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of our dreams, and I think it would really help our urban forest, is if it was under one umbrella of an urban forester who understands the science of trees and how to grow our urban canopy.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
There was a volunteer who is doing an internship at SDOT, and I wanted him to come tonight, but he's a student, and he doesn't want to speak for SDOT and get, in trouble. But he was educating me the other day about how he's constantly, they're constantly planting trees in SDOT, but then tree removals are tracked in SDCI, and he doesn't know ever how to get the data to talk to each other, right? We can't, if you have the planting in SDOT and the removal in SDCI, which is the planning department versus the transportation department, and you have it in the permitting department. And for folks that don't know, I'm going to get real political wonky, but SDCI is a fee-based department, and so it's not funded in the budget. So every fall we advocate for the budget. Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection is only funded through fees. It's not funded any other way. So it can go up and down depending on their activity. And it can basically, if it goes dormant, it can basically unfund itself, which is what's happening with renter protections right now in the RRIO program, because they didn't do the inspections over COVID. So then they lost the money to pay for the inspectors to do the inspections. And so renters aren't getting inspected. And so the same thing is that entire department being outside of the budget and having tree removal tracking in that, it's just infuriating. It absolutely, trees should absolutely not live in SDCI. And SDOT seems to really care about planting trees. I don't know why they can't also be dealing with the removal of them. I don't know.
Laura, you hit the nail on the head, because if a tree stays in the ground, SDCI gets no money. But if you apply to remove it and to build something, then they get money. So there's no incentive to keep a tree, you know. But I did want to say that SDOT tracks their own removals. They track you get a permit to remove a street tree. It only goes through SDOT, and you plant, you get a permit. So it's two completely separate systems, which it would be much better. Obviously, it's common sense, right?
But that's not the only department. So then there's other departments that have to deal with trees, right?
Right.
Like there's I don't know all of them, but the fact that there's more than two it makes me feel very uncomfortable very fast. And I think a lot of people that advocate for building and construction understand how city processes can harm costs for renters and other folks around building, and to understand that the same things that kind of bog down housing, you know, having to go through all these, you know, city light doesn't get you the thing on time, and it's like a catch-22 where you're stuck between 6 departments.
Mm-hmm.
that can actually also happen for trees, I think is a really good point of like common ground around making our government work better.
I agree. That's a great point.
Josh, did you want to add anything about a way that people, what are some of the recommendations from the Urban Forestry Commission around this? I know you're not speaking for them tonight. Sorry to put you on the spot. You don't have to.
I mean, and related to Brian's question about street trees and whose responsibility it is to maintain them, I think that's really inequitable, and especially for people with lower incomes, the responsibilities can be prohibitive. Somebody on Seattle Audubon's conservation committee had to deal with a sidewalk upheaval from a tree, and it was $10,000 plus, and that's a huge disincentive to keep a tree. There are other cities like San Francisco or DC whose Department of Transportation, all street trees are maintained by the city. And I'd love to see something similar in Seattle because they're providing public benefit. They're on public property, and the private onus to maintain them isn't equitable. And so one way that we might think about funding that type of maintenance are through the payment in lieu mechanism, which has been proposed. So if developers do have to remove trees for development, they're required to replace them, they have the option to either do that on site through planting a new tree, off site by planting a new tree, or by paying into a payment in lieu fund, which could fund tree planting and maintenance.
I need like an infographic of what you just said, because I got distracted and like I'm just saying, like whatever you just said, like can I get like the one pager of like how to like, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
That was my fault. No, but yeah, I think that the takeaway for folks watching this after the fact is that the tree thing, people are mad about trees, and some of it is valid, and that dismissing tree people's anger from urbanist side of things, which is folks that want, dense cities to have people not have to drive everywhere and fight climate change through land use, that this tree versus thing that, you can read about in the op-ed, I don't know if somebody wants to drop that in the chat if you haven't read it, is like it is the way we have way too much to do to be like not actually listening a little bit. And so there's some really important points that the tree people are making. They've had some terrible messengers, and I have two of the best messengers here tonight, the good ones. So, okay. Anyone else want to say anything? Brian and Holly? Yeah, there's our op-ed. Okay. Anyone else want to have a question? You can write the word stack or question in the chat. Honestly, this isn't going to be the last time that you hear from Joshua and Sandy and me. I'm going to take this show on the road. I don't know if they're going to join me or not. I haven't invited them officially yet, but I'm speaking to the Georgetown Community Council as well as the South Park Community Council about trees in the next few months, and going to be sharing, this with them. And, a lot of folks around the city during the comprehensive plan update are going to be asked to weigh in on a lot of things. The advocacy side of Share the City is, really focused on public bathrooms and public broadband, but definitely trees, and being really specific with your asks around trees, really talking about like that 1-for-1 replacement and things like that. Yeah, and there's a survey. I'm going to add that to the list. I'm going to make a note for myself in the chat because I'm going to save the chat. But there's a comp plan survey right now that people can leave comments on. And yeah, I'm sorry, I always slip into advocacy mode. If you're a board member watching this, don't listen. I can't help it. But yes, educate yourselves, take action, comment. Does anyone else want to add anything about trees? And again, like I said, the reason we're doing this connected to the Wallingford for All work is that really motivated us. There's about 8 of us that have gone out and knocked on doors. And it's just like, oh, another tree thing, another tree thing, another tree thing. I guess we better do, this was in March. And we're like, oh, I guess we better do like a tree thing about trees because people are upset about trees. So it'll be exciting, when we talk to people now to be able to point them to this resource that has the current information in a way that I think hopefully is better than just sending them a link to the website of SDCI, which I think is a terrible way to get people excited about a topic or interested about engaging in government. So hopefully this is a little bit more interesting for folks than just sending them to a website, maybe, hopefully. So I'm gonna do there. I think we're good. Does anyone have any last words?
I just wanted to share that Seattle Audubon does have a tree policy action alert that's live. It's a couple of click, send a message to the city council and mayor. Is it okay, Laura, if I drop that in the chat?
Yeah, please do.
You did
it, not me.
And then I would just second Sandy's call for you to get to know the trees in your neighborhood. The street tree app is really great. It works on your phone. You can zoom into your phone's mobile location. It's really wonderful. And it's great to get to know the trees in your neighborhood.
Sandy, any last words about maybe a farmer's market? Do the last 6,000 we'll just post on the Instagram when there's an upcoming farmer's market?
Yeah, we always post ahead of time, and we have a lot of fun things that we post on. So we post at least twice a week. So it's pretty much only on Instagram, but it's worth getting on Instagram just for that.
I've gone to some last 6,000 events, at least 2 of them. And then I did do the farmer's market with Sandy at the Magnolia Farmer's Market. And they have a big presentation board with photos, and a lot of people were coming up and sharing, their favorite tree in their neighborhood. And it was just a really engaging, like, community conversation. So yeah, I know it's something people care a lot about, but connecting that to like our boring, complicated government systems is like, that's the line I want to connect for people. Cool. I appreciate all of you, and I'm glad that you exist in Seattle because things are rough out there.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Laura.
We're glad for you, Laura.
I appreciate all of you. And let's make decisions in our city based on the things that we're mad about and direct our focus to the things that will actually change the things we're upset about. It is not clear to me that purely honorific national historic designation in Wallingford will actually protect our tree canopy. But the things we've talked about tonight, I know will protect our tree canopy. And so when people are, making a decision on the historic district based on their feelings about trees, I really want to give them the opportunity to go, okay, I'm hearing that. Like, let's talk about what you're actually upset about, and let's take, steps to have your voice actually be heard around the issue that you're most mad about. Because I think people will unfortunately support something, you know, not knowing that it may or may not actually help the issue that matters to them the most. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.